Hello there, everybody. I am Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach. I'm the founder of the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program, author of these 6 books here. I'll tell you about that later on. And I'm also the creator of No Hassle Newsletters, the extraordinary done-for-you newsletter program used by over 1,200 small business owners in 9 different countries. But most importantly, today, I'm the host of Dream Business Radio now in its 10th year. This is episode 538. Wow. It astounds me every time I say that. So, Nadine, how are you doing today? I'm sorry. I'm a little all over the place today. How are you doing, Nadine?
Jim, how are you? And my goodness, congratulations. That is quite a record. 10 years and 538.
I know it seems like yesterday. Not really. It seems like 500 shows, but no, they're all good. Hey, folks, this episode. I'm sorry. I'm going to properly introduce my guest, Nadine Keller. I'm just a little disheveled today. It's been an interesting couple of weeks. Anyway, this episode is brought to you by the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program. If you are an entrepreneur, a small business owner who's tired of slow to no growth in your business, if you're feeling overwhelmed, unfocused, but especially if you'd like to learn how to create multiple streams of revenue in your business, then you want to check out the Dream Business Mastermind led by me, Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach. You can do that at dreambizcoaching.com, dreambizcoaching.com. All right, let me reclaim my professional mantle here. Nadine Keller is president and CEO of Precision Sales Coaching and Training. Her firm has provided strategic programs for tens of thousands of sales professionals with measurable results. Her expertise crosses sales, marketing, and communications with a focus on helping organizations drive sales behavior to achieve their goals. And throughout the 90s, I almost dated you there. Throughout the 90s, as the director of as the director of sales and training for the Chase Manhattan Bank, Nadine developed an in-depth understanding of how to use training to drive strategy. Nadine served as the personal communications consultant to the vice chairman and was later appointed director of marketing for a global bank. Wow, some big clients and experience there. In 1998, Nadine left Chase to start her own consulting practice. She worked with numerous Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies across many industries with a focus on complex business-to-business sales. Frustrated with the limitations of traditional classroom training, she looked for an even more effective and efficient way to develop sales effectiveness. And this work has culminated in the creation of Precision Sales Coaching and Training in 2006. What is with my words and my numbers today? Nadine's most recent book is called Make It All About Them, Winning Sales Presentations, which is how I titled this interview. Nadine, I apologize for stumbling over my words today. We haven't had much sleep in the last week or so, but welcome to Dream Business Radio. I'm thrilled to have you with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And you got that big clock. When I met Nadine, I said, look at that. Are you in London? Is that Big Ben? That is one ginormous clock.
Keeps me on my toes.
There you go. So Nadine, you've had a tremendous career and, in corporate America, and I know you're excited to impact even more business owners and companies. With all of that time in corporate America, I'm curious if you had that little entrepreneurial itch, as I sometimes call it. Were you always thinking about eventually I'll go out on my own, or was there some life event that kind of made that happen for you?
No, well, I guess a combination of the two, but I consider myself a serial entrepreneur.
Okay.
So in addition to what was on the resume, I also had a patent on a dog collar, and a dog collar business for a while, which I sold. So I love entrepreneurship. And it did, in fact, there was a life event too, which is, of course, being a new mom. I timed my consulting, the beginning of my consulting journey, with being a new mom so that I would have some flexibility. And
there you go.
know what? It has served me well.
So I'm guessing, I probably know the answer to this, but I'm sure you appreciate with all the challenges being an entrepreneur in control versus corporate America, where you're kind of at somebody else's beck and call. Does that agree with you?
Absolutely. Big difference. And actually, Jim, when I, left Chase, well, I was fortunate enough that Chase became my first client. And oddly enough, JP Morgan became my second. And we
Mm,
know what happened to the two of them, which is never a good scenario when you're
yeah.
a consultant to have your only two clients merge. But it forced
Then you're
me out.
down to one.
Yeah, it forced me out in the industry, and I learned very early on that as an entrepreneur, you're really you know are at risk of mergers and changes in, especially if it's B2B, right? Changes in
Right.
leadership and all of that. So it forced me in a situation of really needing to market my own business. And as I was just going to say, in the time that I became an entrepreneur, I mean, it was really before, I mean, not before the internet, but before we were using it like we were today and
Hmm.
all the technology. So I was leaving a situation where I had an administrative assistant and a team and all of that. And then you don't have that. And you don't have, what we have today as a support. So it was an interesting time.
Yeah. So I love your book. I was speed reading that in preparation for the interview, and I want to focus on some of the things in there. Did you always like sales? Were you always good at it? I mean, did you start in sales, or was that kind of an acquired skill? I mean, sometimes we learn later in life. Wow, I'm really good at this. What was your path?
Well, I always loved people, and I always was curious. And
Hmm.
so while I may not have consciously thought, "Oh boy, I love sales," unconsciously, I think I was drawn to it for those reasons, and also being in service of people. In today's world, sometimes we think sales is something that you do to someone, and I look at it as something that we do for someone. So that has made it easy because, sales has got a bad rap, right? And
Hmm.
for a lot of good reasons, but because there's been some bad sales behavior out there.
Yep.
But if you look at it as I do, which is being in service of the person that you're talking to, I think it's a terrific practice and discipline that I just love.
Yeah. Um, I know that you recently, I think last year, you were telling me that you've interviewed over 100 women entrepreneurs, which I think is pretty cool. And you're doing something, or studying or developing a program about the feminine side of sales. Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah. So with the precision business is 18 years old. It's focused on Fortune 100 companies. And about a year ago, it occurred to me that as much as I have loved that work, I wanted to bring together my experience as an entrepreneur with my sales disciplines and best practices that we've developed over the years and serve women entrepreneurs. Because when I started my business, there weren't a lot of people out there to help people like me. But before doing that, and I actually brought on a partner to work with me on this. And before we developed any kind of a program, we said we want to interview a minimum of 50 women entrepreneurs so
Hmm.
that we could understand the challenges. And experience was so fruitful that we decided to just continue to do it. And in fact, we are still interviewing now. And
Wow.
yeah, and a lot of themes, surface that helped us to develop the program that we have today.
Back in the day, and this is back in my day. I'm not going to date you like I almost did with your introduction, but back in the day, there's Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy. There was a lot of men. I don't recall a lot of, if any, women that were writing books about sales. Am I wrong, or
You are absolutely right. In fact,
okay?
when I had this idea and just a year ago started research, one of the ways I did it is I went on YouTube and I searched for sales, right? And selling
Okay.
skills and all of that kind of stuff. And I am telling you, the first 60 videos that came up, I didn't get to a video with a woman before the 61st video.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And what's interesting is that in our research, a lot of consistent themes came up, but one that came up was that women are uncomfortable with sales and they don't want to be salesy. And I think that it's not only women, right? It's men as well.
Yeah.
But when we think about it, the sales processes that we have today were developed at the turn of the century. They've evolved some, but it was a male dominated world out there.
Yeah.
So I think women can feel uncomfortable with that. And I also think that men can benefit from the female energy when we take a look at sales.
Well, the amount of females in the workplace today compared to even the 80s is dramatically higher, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But women approach, and in fact, it was interesting because I did an article, I think it was for Inc. A few years ago about selling to women and how women buy differently from men. And it's
Mm,
often not discussed really. We assume that we're all the same buyers. And
yeah.
just like we're not also, we don't approach sales the same way. And it's not that one way is better than the other. It's actually the combination of the female and the male energy that really can be the most powerful.
One of my clients a few years ago is she's a lawyer, woman, life coach and stuff, but she was teaching mostly women life coaches the business side of life coaching, where it's more than just a passion, hobby, one of an impact. Well, it has to be a business too,
Yeah.
right? And she used to say, Jim, my biggest problem is I hate sales. I think
Mm.
it's icky. I think she used the word smarmy and just all, it felt
Yeah, we
weird.
got a lot of those words.
Yeah. So is that pretty common across the 100+ interviews you're doing
Uh,
now?
Very, very common. I mean,
Hmm.
it's one of the strongest themes. We have about three top themes, and this one was one of them. And it's that feeling of, if you think about the used car salesman, right?
Hmm.
And so, of course, that's not what the true practice of selling is about. The true practice of selling is to really understand and help the client to understand their needs and their opportunities, and then determine together if it makes sense for you to work together or not. And it takes the pressure off of, I've always been fascinated with closing techniques. There are so many closing techniques. There's
Right.
the puppy dog close and
The
and
Columbo close.
so close. And for me, closing is really just a natural evolution of the conversation. And where the magic happens is in the earlier parts, right? The understanding of the needs and positioning potential solutions in the context of those needs.
So just curious, and this is sometimes happens when I get really into a topic, I kind of forget the question I want to ask you and I just go. I'm curious, are women more vocal about some of these objections or how it feels, and men don't feel right to say it? Or are they just tuned differently and they're okay doing what's always been done?
I think a little bit of both. So, of course, in my career, my Fortune 100 career, I would say, we focused on financial services. So
Right.
I would say 90% of the people we worked with were men. And yeah, men don't like to be salesy or pushy either. But I think
Hmm.
women tend to be a little bit more, sensitive to it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. So in your book, Make It All About Them, Winning Sales Presentations, folks, which you can get on Amazon. It was interesting that you broke it up into three sections with different bullets under each, but what you present, which is the message, the skill, how you say it, and then the materials, what we say with it. It seems like some of the other books, which by the way, some of the ones I've mentioned on my bookshelf today, but it's like they're huge. And your book is a little more concise based on these three sections. I mean, I'm sure you did that intentionally because it's your book, but can you talk a little bit about how and why you set up the book like that?
Sure. So the book, again, this came out when I was working with the Fortune 100, companies, and
Hmm.
we were doing a lot of work in finals presentations, but which were very formal, kind of beauty contests, right? Where they might be $1 billion deals, and we're gathering a group of people together, a sales team that is presenting to a buying committee. And so the first thing that I wanted to kind of get the point across is that we all think it's about the what, it's about the content, what you say,
Right.
really about how the client experiences you. And this is everything that's in that book applies to B2C sales or smaller sales as well, which is there's more at play than just the what. There is how you, if you're working with someone, how you're interacting with them. It is if you're using materials, how you're interacting with the materials, how you're bringing in the client, etc. So since I've been in adult learning in all of my life, I wrote the book in a way, and this is how we approach our program as well for women entrepreneurs. It
Mm-hmm.
is no nonsense. So I believe in the power of storytelling. So you'll get lots of stories in there. But the reason why somebody's picking up this book is so that they can apply it to their own situations and that they can increase their sales. So, I wanted to write the book in the simplest of ways so that anyone could apply the concept simply. And again, that's the same way we approach our program for women entrepreneurs.
I'm a big fan of storytelling. I think people get drawn into a good story and therefore they can learn something. You can kind of get them down this path, but some people are uncomfortable telling a story. It feels like, let me tell you about the features and benefits. Let me handle your objections. They go formulaic and almost robotic, which is the antithesis, I'm quite sure, of what you teach. But for somebody who's unfamiliar with storytelling or even uncomfortable doing it, do you have any tips in that regard?
Absolutely. So everyone, well, first of all, let's acknowledge that we are all storytellers. It's 4:00 here on the East Coast, and I can't imagine how many stories I've told at this point, right?
Yeah.
And people just aren't conscious of it. But when it gets to a business situation, we sometimes aren't, well, first of all, we may not recognize the power of the story, and a story is going to be much more memorable, much more interesting, right, than any kind of facts and figures
Right.
aligned with it. But there is a way to tell a story that will ensure that your audience gets the point of the story.
Okay.
And very simply, what we recommend to people is be really clear about the point up front, right? Let me tell you a story, Jim, that really emphasizes how you will get a return on investment, right, from this. We worked with a client last year, blah, blah, blah. Then I tell the story and I end it with, I tell you that story, Jim, because you too can expect that kind of return on investment.
So you lead with what may be the punchline or the conclusion you want them to have, rather than just launching into the story and then having them figure it out, or you point it out at the end. You go with right at the top.
Right. Well, we probably have all been in the situation where we're telling a story and then somebody's telling you a story and saying, you're thinking, why are they telling me that story?
Yeah.
We don't want that to happen in the sales process. We want to be upfront, right? Or worst
Interesting.
scenario is you're the one telling the story and you're like, why am I telling you this story?
You can't remember.
That's right. So, and ironically, the better the storyteller you are, the more important it is to remember to tell the point of the story, because we're engaging people in a scenario and you're bringing them in with you, right? And it's easy for them to forget. But in sales, it's really important to remember that. So we call it the sandwich technique.
Nice.
Point, story, point.
Okay, so in the first chapter, it's the subtitle of the book, "Make It All About Them," in which you say it's more about working with you and not the what you sell, right? Because no matter what you sell, product or service, it's likely to be a commodity because there's 100 other people doing it. So is that why you focus on the relationship?
Absolutely.
That
Well,
way?
first and foremost, it should be about the client, right?
Okay.
And in sales almost sets us up for thinking it's about us, where you've got the client on the other end saying, okay, what you got, you know?
Mhm.
And our tendency is to say, well, we have this and we have this and we have that. It's not about us at all. It's really about what we can do for the client. So it always has to begin with the client, their needs, their problems, their opportunities, and being able to really do a deep dive on this. On the B2B side, it's not just about what you think it's about. There are personal needs there that you have to understand and other drivers. And the same with the B2C side. When we engage in a conversation with someone, we really need to be able to go deep so that we are able to understand how and if we can help them and if our solution is right for them. And if it is, we will be able to present that in a much more compelling way than if we just kind of do some surface needs analysis.
I see. So with your prior corporate experience, and now you work with entrepreneurs, small business owners, and corporate alike, but so in other words, you've seen both sides of the coin. It's interesting that when you're working with entrepreneurs, you're typically working with the owner, the buyer, the decision maker, right? But sometimes in corporate America, you have to deal with either the buyer or the head of this department, and they may or may not be the ultimate decision maker, right?
Oh, yeah. So, in fact, we just did a webinar a couple of weeks ago at, selling to corporates, because it
Mm-hmm.
is a very, very different kind of a sale. And there are we work with women in service businesses. So one route it's not for everybody, but one route to really growing your business is to take it B2B. However, you've got to, if you just said, you have multiple decision makers, you may have procurement involved. With multiple decision makers come multiple viewpoints, right? You may
Mm-hmm.
not even meet the decision maker. You've got formal proposals and things like that. So there's an art to all of that, and a science to all of it. But while the selling skills are the same across the board, you're always going to be making it about them, right? You're always going to be doing a deep dive on a diagnostic to understand the needs and opportunities. It is a different context, the B2B and the B2C sales.
Seems to me the B2B sales, especially in a corporation, as a copywriter, the one job of the headline is to get them to read the next headline. Then that it just keeps building, right? Which is kind of the essence of storytelling, if you will. But in a corporate environment, I guess if you're selling to major corporations, your job to go to this person is so they can then introduce you to here and here. So you're not giving your same presentation 5 different times, right?
Well, it's really first and foremost understanding the buying process,
Okay.
right? Who the decision makers are. So that's where, and I think a lot of mistakes that people make is they are often afraid to ask the important questions, because a question like, who makes the decisions around here is not going to feel very good for anybody, right? And so they
Right.
say, oh, I can't ask that question, it's uncomfortable. But there's a way to do that makes it comfortable for you to ask and them to answer. And that very simply is telling them the reason why you're asking and what the benefit is for them to answer. So it may be, so that we make sure and include everyone that you want included here. Can you tell me a little bit about the decision-making process,
I see.
so that we can make it as efficient for you, right? So you got the benefit, you have the reason there.
Okay.
So asking those questions about the buying process is important. And then recognizing, I always suggest that, to the extent that you can, as early as possible, bring on an advocate or a coach. And usually this is the person that brought you in, but you may share with them in advance of submitting the proposal, this is what I'm thinking. Can you take a look at it and see if it's on target? But really start to bring that person in as your advocate, who will in turn begin to share information with you because they want you to succeed. Because
Right. Um, I'm fascinated with the corporate structure and the differences, but most of my audience are small business owners. So I'll steer the last 5 minutes or so in that direction. In the middle section of your book, Nadine, you write about speaking the client's language. What do you mean by that?
So you keep it simple, 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 simple. And so this is, we live in this world of jargon. And when we're young, using that jargon almost makes us feel like we're a part of the club, right? We
Hmm.
have our secret language. Well, we don't want to have a secret language when it comes to clients. We want to be as simple, plain as possible. So plain old English. It's all about helping people, it's about connection. And when you use jargon, we know from research that, well, two things can happen. One is the more jargon a person uses, the less trustworthy they're perceived.
Right.
And then even if the jargon is somewhat familiar to the person that you're speaking with, we have to kind of jump out of our full listening for a second to think about that word and what it means. And then we've lost them a little bit. So keep it plain. And then of course, yes, mirror their language. If they're using particular adjectives to talk about their problem, we'll want to use those words, right? And those can
Yeah.
also help us trigger getting deeper. If somebody, says that we're looking for this is a bad example, an uncomplicated solution.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity to, as we say, double click on and say, can you say more about an uncomplicated solution? So that's a way to mirror back their language.
Yeah. So I cut my teeth and learned how to be a salesman 40 plus years ago in a bike shop. And one of the things I learned back when the bikes were 10 speeds, right? 10
Oh,
speed bikes.
wow, right.
I know. And actually, I invested in a sales training program that was on VHS tape that we watched. And one of the things I learned, and it stuck with me all these years, is that when somebody comes in and looks at a bike and you go, well, it's got a chrome moly frame, or it's got aluminum wheels, or it's got this, that, and the other thing. A lot of the customers may not understand what you're saying. You're giving them facts. It's honest, but they're not going to say, I don't know what that means. Right. So it goes over their head and you're not making a connection. So I learned that if you do say something like that, you then explain why it's important, which means it's very lightweight, it's strong, it's going to get you up and going.
That's
So
all about features and benefits, right?
yeah, and I felt that was a good example of when you use jargon that goes over somebody's head, you're not connecting.
You're not connecting, and the problem is that we're so focused on what we're going to say that we're not truly listening. And I remember many, many moons ago when we were bringing an au pair over from Germany. My husband and I went to get a used car for her to drive.
Hmm.
And the car salesman asked me the question, so, which is great. How are you going to use the car? I explained that we had a au pair coming from Germany, and she would be taking my little ones to school, which horrified me every day. And
Right.
he takes out a car and he starts talking about how it goes from 0 to 60 in less than
Oh,
whatever,
great.
right? So
Yeah.
you can ask the question, but if you're not listening, right, and especially to the emotional piece of what my needs were, he could have just as easy talked about the airbag system or
That's right. Or how secure the restraints are that hold the child seat and
of
the side
course.
door panels, everything that's important to you. 0 to 60 with your kids
No,
going to school is not important to
no,
you.
that did not work. Right.
Oh my goodness. Oh, we got about 2 or 3 minutes. I want to squeeze in another. See if I can get in two. Um, Anticipating and answering questions. That's another section of your book. Does that refer to the objections and you handle them up front so they don't come later, or something else?
Well, to the extent that you can do that, that's great. But most people will mask an objection as a question,
Hmm.
but not every question is an objection. So it's important that we think through what are the likely, and to the extent that you said, you can anticipate, especially, once you get, and we work with our women entrepreneurs a lot on this, is understanding who their ideal client is. And once you really get a deep understanding of that, you can also understand what are those potential objections. And you can preempt them by putting them, even in a Q&A on your website. Or if you're sensing it in a sales conversation, you can preempt them as well. But the idea here is to be thoughtful about what are those likely objections, and to, think through and not assume what people mean by their objection. That's probably the biggest mistake people make, is they've heard it before. So they jump to addressing it instead of fully understanding it. So if somebody says, this just seems like it's going to take too much time, instead of saying, but it's only going to take, we can do it in this amount of time, blah, blah, blah. This taking too much time could mean 15 different things, right? So we have to stick with and say, can you say more about, when you say time, what do you mean?
Yeah. So ask a clarifying question. So you make sure you're going to give an answer to what they're asking,
what
actually.
the real issue is.
Yeah. Very interesting. I knew I would love this conversation. Nadine, thank you so much. How can people connect with you? I mean, do you want them to go to Amazon for the book? You can give out your website, whatever you'd like to do.
Or the book is Make It All About Them, but our website is Precision Sales Coaching and Training. And as I said, we're interviewing women entrepreneurs and service-based businesses. And any one of your audience who fits that, we would love to talk to you. We also love to talk to men as well. So I don't want to just that. But in exchange, we make sure that that we add value. And I think we have a pretty good track record of doing that in every interview we've conducted.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nadine. I really enjoyed the afternoon. I'm sure my audience got a lot out of it as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Jim. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, folks, that wraps up this very special interview with my guest, Nadine Keller from Connecticut and Precision Sales Training. I highly recommend you connect with her, follow her, get her book, and learn from her. You can connect with me, other than this podcast, at getjimpalmer.com. That's my home base. Again, if you're interested in joining me and about 27 other smart entrepreneurs in the Dream Business Mastermind, that is Dream Biz Coaching, dreambizcoaching.com. And here's what I was going to tell you before. As part of my legacy building program, because that hair on my face is quite white, so my time is limited now, not too much. I've made all six of my books free as digital. So you can go to Amazon, download the Kindle, Barnes & Noble if you're into the Nook books, and they're in the iBook store, totally free, no opt-in, no nothing, just to get a great education, courtesy of me. But that's it. Until this time next week, another fantastic interview. I am Captain Jim Palmer, and I'm the Dream Business Coach. You take good care.